Imagine for a second, right, that you are being asked to walk completely unarmed into the capital city of a hostile invading superpower.
Oh, man. That's terrifying just to think about.
Right, and we are talking about an empire that is literally known for skinning its enemies alive, stacking their skulls outside city gates.
Yeah, just absolute brutal psychological warfare.
Exactly, and your job is to just walk right into the center of that power, stand in the town square, and tell them that their entire civilization is about to be wiped off the map.
Because of their violence.
Yeah.
Right. Which, I mean, is basically a suicide mission.
Yeah.
There is literally no historical or rational precedent where a person does that and actually survives.
You would just run the other way. I mean, anyone would.
Oh, 100%.
And yet, this terrifying geopolitical nightmare is actually the setting for a story that, bizarrely enough, most of us were introduced to as toddlers.
Which is so funny when you actually step back and look at it.
It really is. So today, we are taking a deep dive into a text that you probably think you already know. We have this incredibly comprehensive source document in front of us titled Survey of the Book of Jonah by Chris R. Valasis.
It's a fantastic survey, really detailed.
And our mission today, and I love this, is basically a rescue operation.
I like that framing. We really do need to, rescue this book from its own reputation.
Because if you are listening to this and you grew up anywhere near a Sunday school or like a children's book section, you know the flannel graph version of this story.
Oh, yeah, the cute little whale.
Right? It's this comforting, simple tale about a guy who disobeys God, gets swallowed by a whale, says he's sorry, and eventually goes to preach. It's treated like a fable.
Yeah, a bedtime story.
But looking at the extensive research and literary analysis in this document, that children's story is essentially a cartoonish distortion of the original text.
It completely sanitizes what is actually a masterpiece of ancient literature.
It really does.
What the source material establishes right from the beginning is that Jonah is a profoundly sophisticated, theologically dense prophetic narrative.
Dense is definitely the word.
Yeah. And the central shocking twist of this text is that the prophet's spectacular, embarrassing failure is the exact vehicle God uses to demonstrate mercy to total outsiders.
It flips every expectation on its head. Like, the supposed hero of the story acts like a complete villain.
And the terrifying, bloodthirsty enemies end up looking like absolute saints.
It is wild.
Oh,
it is a...
Exactly. This is during the reign of an Israelite king named Jeroboam II.
Okay.
And there's actually a brief mention of a prophet named Jonah, son of Amittai, in the historical book of 2 Kings, chapter 14.
Oh, so he's a real guy mentioned elsewhere.
Yeah, so the character is anchored in a very specific time period. But in the 8th century BCE, the geopolitical reality for Israel wasn't just about their own internal politics.
Right. They had bigger problems.
Much bigger. It was about the terrifying shadow looming over the entire region, which was the Neo-Assyrian Empire.
And reading through the background material here, I mean, it is hard to overstate the absolute terror that Assyria inspired.
Oh, completely.
They weren't just a neighboring country with whom Israel had, occasional border skirmishes.
Not at all. They were the apex predators of the ancient Near East.
Apex predators, yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Their entire imperial strategy was built on psychological warfare.
Like the skull stacking we mentioned.
Exactly. They utilized military expansion, mass deportation of conquered peoples, like just moving entire populations, and calculated, highly publicized intimidation.
So they wanted you to be terrified of them.
Right. If you resisted Assyria, they didn't just defeat your army. They made a horrifying public spectacle of your leadership to ensure no one else would ever dare to rebel.
And the crown jewel of this empire, the city that represented the heart of this war machine, was Nineveh.
Yes, Nineveh, situated right on the Tigris River.
Which is exactly where God tells this Israelite prophet to go.
Right.
Okay, looking at the text here, this is where the sheer audacity of the premise just hits you.
It's staggering.
Because God isn't just asking Jonah to cross a geographical border, he is asking him to cross massive ethnic and theological lines.
It is a profound boundary violation in the eyes of an ancient Israelite.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
Well, the Assyrian state religion was polytheistic, right?
Right.
And it was deeply, inextricably tied to their military conquests.
So their gods were basically war gods.
Exactly. Their gods were gods of war and dominance. So to go to Nineveh wasn't just taking a dangerous trip.
It was spiritual warfare.
It was walking into the spiritual and political headquarters of the enemy, the very people actively threatening to erase Jonah's people from the map. and delivering a message from Yahweh, the God of Israel.
Man, it makes absolute sense why he wouldn't want to go. I'd buy a ticket the other way, too.
Oh, absolutely.
But here is where the timeline in the research gets incredibly fascinating. And I actually need to push back on this a bit because it feels like a contradiction.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, the story is clearly set in the 8th century BCE, right? But the scholarly consensus detailed in the text argues that the final literary form of the book, like the actual words we are reading, was compiled centuries later.
Right, yeah.
They place it in the 5th or 4th century BCE.
Yes, that is the prevailing scholarly view. It is written for a post-exilic Israelite community.
But wait, if it was finalized hundreds of years after the events supposedly took place, does that mean the whole thing is just historical fiction?
Well, because it feels like someone today writing, I don't know, a highly stylized satirical novel set during the Revolutionary War just to make a point about modern internet culture.
That's a great way to put it.
Like you're using a real historical setting to teach a lesson to a completely different generation. Is that what's happening here?
That is a brilliant analogy, and it really captures the tension perfectly.
Okay.
The document actually addresses this directly by offering what it terms the best evangelical synthesis.
The best evangelical synthesis.
I got it.
Right. The argument is that the book is absolutely anchored in historical reality. Like there was a real Jonah, a real Assyria, a real mission.
So it's not totally made up.
No, not at all. But the narrative has been intentionally, masterfully shaped into a theological satire for a later audience.
I see.
The history is real, but the presentation is highly stylized to make a very specific point.
So why would a community living in the 5th century BCE even care about an 8th century prophet going to an empire that didn't even exist anymore? Assyria was long gone by then, right?
Yeah. Right, they had been conquered. So to understand why it matters to them, we have to look at the psychology of that post-exilic community.
Okay, paint a picture of that for me.
These were Israelites who had returned from a devastating, multi-generational exile in Babylon.
So they've been through immense trauma.
Huge trauma.
Yeah.
Their ancestors' homeland had been destroyed, they had lived as captives in a foreign empire, and now they were back, just trying to rebuild.
Right.
They were rebuilding their identity, their temple, and literally rebuilding the physical walls around Jerusalem.
You can imagine the intense instinct there. Like, when you survive something like that, your immediate reaction is self-preservation.
Oh, totally.
You build walls, you draw incredibly strict lines between us and them.
Exactly. The psychological temptation toward isolationism was immense.
Yeah.
They were cultivating a kind of defensive nationalism.
Defensive nationalism, yeah.
The prevailing mindset was, we are the remnant. We survived because we are God's chosen people. The outside world is dangerous and corrupt. Let's keep the outside world out and keep God's grace strictly for ourselves.
Right. They were fiercely protecting their covenant identity.
Precisely. And into that exact highly defensive cultural moment, this book is finalized and circulated.
Boom. Here's a story about loving your enemy.
Exactly. Its purpose is to directly challenge the deeply controversial idea of Gentile inclusion and enemy love.
Wow.
It takes the historical figure of Jonah from the 8th century, a time when Assyria was the great, terrifying other, and uses him to hold up a psychological mirror to the later community's own prejudices.
So it's forcing them to look at themselves.
Yes, it forces them to ask, wait, are we behaving just like this resentful, narrow-minded prophet?
And to make the mirror even more effective, the author doesn't skimp on the details of the setting. Like, the archaeology highlighted in the document completely backs up the sheer intimidating scale of Nineveh.
Oh, the archaeology is fascinating.
It wasn't some mythic, made-up metropolis.
Not at all. The archaeological record is staggering.
Yeah.
The ruins of Nineveh are located near modern-day Mosul in Iraq, and they are just massive. The source points to specific excavations, like the Kuinjik and Nebi Innes mouths.
The walls. I was reading about the walls.
The walls are incredible.
Yeah.
Archaeological evidence shows city walls measuring roughly 12 kilometers in circumference.
12 kilometers.
Yes. This massive expansion was largely driven by the Assyrian Emperor Sennacherib around the turn of the 7th century BCE.
Okay.
So when the biblical text continually emphasizes Nineveh as a great city, it is absolutely grounded in physical, historical reality.
Right.
It was a sprawling, intimidating, heavily fortified hub of ultimate power and wealth.
It's basically the ancient equivalent of the Death Star.
That's a perfect analogy.
So we have this very real, very terrifying historical setting, engineered to deliver a crushing theological lesson to a traumatized, isolated later generation. Now that we understand the where and the when, we have to look at the how. Because the way this author structures the story isn't just basic storytelling.
No, it's so much more than that.
It is an absolute masterclass in literary design.
It really is. The source actually categorizes the book of Jonah using a few overlapping genres.
Okay, what are they?
It calls it a didactic prophetic narrative, a novella, and most importantly, a satire.
Okay, let's unpack that word satire in this context.
Okay.
Because, I mean, when we hear satire today, we think of late-night comedy shows or parody news websites.
Sure.
But how does ancient biblical satire work? Like, is it supposed to be funny?
Well, ancient satire works by taking recognizable forms and subtly exaggerating them to expose a flaw, usually through a profound reversal of expectations.
A reversal of expectations.
Right. It uses hyperbole, irony, and absurdity to disarm the reader's defenses.
Okay, I see.
The author sets you up to expect the story to go one way, like the prophet is holy, the pagans are wicked, and then violently flips those roles.
And you can see that flip structurally right from the opening verses. The document points out a structural movement that is just fascinating.
At skill descent, yeah.
Right, it's this relentless pattern of downward and upward movement. Think about Jonah's physical trajectory. When God says, arise and go, Jonah doesn't just run away horizontally.
No.
He physically descends.
Yes, the geography mirrors the theology.
Yeah, right. He goes down to the seaport of Joppa. He
Right.
goes down into the ship. Once the storm hits, he goes down into the innermost hold of the ship to sleep.
And it keeps going.
Yeah. Eventually, he goes down into the sea and then down into the belly of the fish.
It's a brilliantly constructed physical descent. He is trying to get as low, as deep, and as far away from the presence of God as physically possible.
It's like he's trying to bury himself.
Exactly. And this entire movement, this entire narrative engine, is driven by some very specific Hebrew verbs that the research highlights.
The verbs are basically the secret code of the whole book.
They really are. Two crucial verbs really structure the theology here. The first is manna, which means to appoint, to prepare, or to ordain.
Okay.
Throughout the story, God is constantly the subject of this verb. God, manna, he appoints the great fish, he appoints a plant, he appoints a worm, and he appoints a scorching east wind.
Oh, wow. So while Jonah thinks he's running away in random chaos, God is meticulously orchestrating every element of creation behind the scenes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It establishes God's absolute sovereignty over nature.
That makes sense.
And then the second crucial verb is shove, which means to turn back, to return, or to repent.
Shove.
Right. This verb is the pivot point for how humans and God relate to one another in the story. It's all about direction. Are you turning away from God, or are you turning back to him?
And Jonah is doing everything in his power to turn away. I mean, his escape plan is the ultimate act of defiance.
It really is.
Jonah isn't just resigning from his job. He's actively trying to short-circuit God's grace. It's like a mail carrier realizing he's been handed a pardon to deliver to his absolute worst enemy, someone who ruined his life.
Yeah.
So instead of delivering it, he throws the letter in the ocean and buys a plane ticket to Antarctica.
That is precisely the mechanism of his rebellion.
Yeah.
He knows what the message will accomplish, and he completely refuses to be the instrument of it.
Yeah.
And the irony of his flight is just staggering. God calls him to travel east by land to Nineveh.
Okay.
Jonah immediately goes to a port and secures passage on a ship heading west across the sea to Tarshish, which in the ancient mindset was essentially the farthest known edge of the map.
He is literally trying to outrun an omnipresent God, which brings up the cultural subversion you mentioned, because in the ancient Near East, society operated on incredibly strict honor and shame dynamics, right?
Less entirely.
Yeah.
Everything was honor and shame.
Yeah.
In that cultural framework, a prophet of Yahweh should be the pinnacle of honor. He's the one who possesses divine truth, the one who brings light to the darkness.
Right.
But the author systematically tears that expectation down.
How so?
Well, the ultimate shock of this satire, and we will see this play out in every chapter, is that everyone else in the story behaves with more honor, more righteousness, and more spiritual sensitivity than God's own prophet.
The pagan sailors, the foreign king, and eventually literal farm animals end up looking better than Jonah.
Exactly.
It is completely upside down. And the author structures the whole book to highlight this contrast. The document notes a probable concentric or chiastic macrostructure to the book.
Let's break that down because it's a vital piece of ancient literary technology.
Yeah, think of a chiastic structure like folding a piece of paper in half. You have the top half of the story and the bottom half. When you fold it, the events on the bottom perfectly mirror the events on the top, but in reverse order. And the crease right in the middle, the center point, is usually where the author hides the most important message.
Right.
Because, ancient writers didn't have bold text, italics, or highlighters, so they used this folding structure to scream to the reader, pay attention to the parallels.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. In the book of Jonah, the broad architecture of the story forms this chiasm.
How does it match up?
Well, the first half of the story, chapter 1, features God's first commission and Jonah's flight. That mirrors the second half, chapter 3, which features God's second commission and Nineveh's response.
Ah, I see.
And then the crisis at sea and Jonah's resulting prayer in chapter 2 perfectly mirrors his emotional crisis and his resulting anger at God in chapter 4.
Man, it's not just a random collection of crazy events. It's a perfectly balanced, mirrored narrative designed to trap the reader in its logic.
It absolutely demands that you compare Jonah's reaction to the sailor's reaction and Jonah's reaction to Nineveh's reaction. Right. And in every single comparison, Jonah fails the test.
So we see Jonah running down and away, trying to escape this mirrored trap he doesn't even realize he's in, which takes us right into the chaos of the storm.
Chapter 1.
Yeah. He's on the boat to Tarshish, thinking he's gotten away. But as the text points out, God doesn't let him go. God hurls a great wind upon the sea.
Chapter 1 is just a masterpiece of pacing and contrast.
Oh, it's so dramatic.
The storm hits, and it is violent enough that the ship threatens to break apart. And notice how the author portrays the pagan sailors here.
Right.
They are terrified, yes, but their terror moves them to action. They are praying desperately, each to his own god. They are frantically hurling the heavy cargo overboard to lighten the ship.
They're doing everything they can.
Right. They are doing absolutely everything humanly and spiritually possible to survive the crisis.
And where is our heroic, spiritually enlightened prophet of God during all this?
He has gone down into the innermost parts of the ship, and he is fast asleep.
It is infuriating. The world is literally falling apart above him. Innocent people are about to die because of his rebellion, and he is completely checked out.
Totally checked out.
But his apathy sets up this incredible step-by-step progression of faith among the sailors. The source material breaks this evolution down beautifully.
It does. The sailors are essentially the anti-Jonah.
The anti-Jonah, exactly.
They model a responsive reverence that the prophet completely lacks. They start with a very natural fear of the storm. Then the captain finds Jonah and begs him to pray to his God.
Right.
When the storm doesn't stop, they cast lots to figure out whose fault this supernatural disaster is, and the lot falls on Jonah.
And then the interrogation begins.
Right. They rapid-fire questions at him. What is your occupation? Where do you come from? What is your country? And of what people are you?
They want answers.
Yeah. And when Jonah finally answers, he says, I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land.
Okay, let's pause right there, because verse 9 is fascinating. On paper, that is a doctrinally perfect statement. Absolutely.
Like if you were writing a systematic theology textbook in the ancient Near East, that is an A-plus confession of faith. He acknowledges Yahweh's supremacy, his heavenly domain, and his creator status over both the sea and the land.
But, and this is what the research powerfully points out, while the theology is pristine, it is ethically hollow. It is entirely disconnected from his reality.
It's the height of hypocrisy. Think about the actual words coming out of his mouth.
Right.
He claims to revere the God who made the sea, while he is literally on a boat trying to cross the sea to escape him.
Yeah.
He says God made the dry land, yet he is fleeing the land God told him to go to. So what does this actually mean for the reader?
The takeaway the document emphasizes here is a profound warning. Orthodoxy without obedience is just hypocrisy.
Wow. Orthodoxy without obedience is hypocrisy.
Exactly. Having the right theological vocabulary, knowing all the correct doctrines, and being able to recite the creeds flawlessly means absolutely nothing if your life is in active rebellion against the God you are describing.
Knowing the truth doesn't mean you are submitting to it.
And the sailors instantly realized the absurdity of his position. The text says the men were exceedingly afraid.
Yeah.
They move from fearing the weather to fearing Yahweh. They ask him, "What is this that you have done?" They are more appalled by Jonah's disobedience than Jonah is.
And their spiritual progression culminates when Jonah tells them the only way to calm the sea is to throw him overboard.
Which they don't even want to do.
No.
These pagan sailors try to row hard back to land to save the life of the guy who is currently causing their death. They actually value human life more than the prophet does.
Exactly. But eventually they realize they have no choice. They cry out to Yahweh, praying to Jonah's God, now asking not to be held guilty of innocent blood.
Right.
They throw Jonah into the sea, and the water immediately ceases its raging. And the chapter ends with these foreign sailors offering sacrifices to Yahweh and making vows.
So they convert.
They have moved from pagan panic to genuine worship.
The mission was a success, just not the one Jonah intended. He accidentally converted the whole boat while trying to run away.
Yeah, pretty much.
But now Jonah is sinking, he's drowning, the descent is almost complete, and we reach the most famous and perhaps most heavily debated element of the entire narrative.
The fish.
What's fish?
The Dagadol, the great fish.
The survey is very intentional about how we should interpret this moment. Because a lot of people read the fish as God's ultimate punishment.
Right.
Like, God sends a sea monster to torture Jonah for running away.
But the text argues the exact opposite. The fish is providential preservation.
Preservation.
Right, remember that verb we discussed earlier? Manna.
Yes, to a point.
God appoints the great fish to swallow Jonah. It isn't a torture chamber. It is a rescue vehicle.
A rescue vehicle.
It stops him from drowning. It is a severe, highly uncomfortable mercy, but it is mercy nonetheless.
Which brings Jonah to his absolute lowest point, physically and geographically, inside the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights, and in chapter 2, he finally prays.
He does.
Now, I have to push back on this prayer, because if you just read it on the surface, it sounds incredible.
Yeah, it really does.
It's this beautiful, poetic psalm. He talks about the waters closing in over him, going down to the roots of the mountains, the seaweed wrapped around his head.
Very vivid imagery.
Yeah. And then he talks about how God brought his life up from the pit. He promises to pay his vows and make sacrifices. He sounds like a guy who has been totally broken and reformed. So is he cured of his rebellion?
That is the crucial nuance that the literary analysis highlights. And honestly, it's so easy to miss.
Okay, what am I missing?
Yes, it is a psalm of thanksgiving. He is genuinely, deeply grateful that he didn't drown.
Sure.
But if you look closely at the actual content of the prayer, it celebrates his deliverance, but it completely lacks any actual repentance for the rebellion that put him there in the first place.
Wait, really? I'm sorry for running away.
None. There's no confession of sin. And even more importantly, there's absolutely no change of heart regarding Nineveh.
Oh, wow.
He doesn't say, Lord, you saved me, so now I will gladly go save them.
It's like someone thanking God for miraculously pulling them out of a horrific car wreck that they caused while driving recklessly.
Right.
But having zero intention of actually changing their driving habits or apologizing to the people they hit.
That's a great way to look at it.
Mm.
He is celebrating the grace he just received, but he is fundamentally unwilling to extend that same grace to anyone else.
Wow.
The theological insight the document draws out here is vital. God's saving help can, and often does, precede full moral transformation.
Deliverance does not equal maturity.
Exactly. God rescues Jonah because God is merciful, but
Yeah.
Jonah remains a deeply flawed, prejudiced individual. You can be the recipient of a miracle and still have a hardened heart.
So Jonah survives the depths. God speaks to the fish, and it vomits Jonah out onto dry land.
Quite the visual.
Yeah, he has survived the ultimate chaotic descent. But the reality is he's just back to square one. He's alive, but he's not fundamentally changed. The fish was basically just the Uber ride back to the starting line of the mission. And honestly, the giant fish isn't even the real shock of the story.
No, the real shock is what happens when a guy who still actively resents his enemies is forced to walk into their city and preach to them anyway.
Which takes us right into the recommissioning in chapter 3, the terribly short sermon, and the massive hyperbolic repentance of Nineveh.
Chapter 3 is amazing.
God comes to Jonah a second time. The Hebrew commands are identical to the first chapter. Kum and Kara, arise and proclaim. Get up and go to Nineveh and preach the message I tell you.
And this time, knowing he can't outrun God, Jonah finally goes.
He gives in.
The text describes Nineveh as an exceedingly great city, a 3 days journey in breadth. Jonah walks one day into the city, finds a spot, and delivers his sermon.
And looking at the text, well, not ... but looking closely at the text, it is, without a doubt, the worst prophetic sermon recorded in the entire Bible.
It really is pathetic. In the original Hebrew, the entire sermon is exactly 5 words long.
5 words.
Yet, 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. That is the entirety of his message.
I just marvel at the absolute lack of effort. He puts in the bare minimum required to technically fulfill his job description so he doesn't get eaten by another fish.
Just phoning it in.
Totally phoning it in. He doesn't introduce who Yahweh is. He doesn't explain what specific sins the Ninevites committed. He offers zero path to salvation or reconciliation.
Nothing.
He doesn't even use the word repent. He basically walks into town, drops a doom bomb, and drops the mic.
Because his goal hasn't changed. He still wants them to fail.
Yeah.
He wants the 40 days to pass in ignorance so that God will finally destroy them.
Yeah.
He is weaponizing ambiguity.
But the author of the book does something absolutely brilliant with the Hebrew language here to undermine Jonah's sabotage. The source document zeroes in on the specific Hebrew word Jonah uses for overthrown.
Yes, the word is hapak.
Okay, we need to unpack the mechanism of this word because this is where the satire really sings. How does hapak function in the text?
Hapak is a verb that means to physically overturn, to demolish, or to destroy.
Okay.
Think of flipping a table over, or a city being reduced to rubble. When Jonah preached, Nineveh will be hapak, he absolutely meant it in the sense of physical annihilation.
Fire and brimstone.
He was predicting fire and brimstone.
But it has a secondary meaning, right?
Right. It functions as a brilliant double entendre. Hapak can also mean to be transformed, to be turned around, or to experience a complete change of heart or situation.
Oh.
So Jonah preaches, Nineveh will be overturned, fully expecting destruction. But the city is indeed overturned, just not the way he wanted.
Wow.
It is overturned through a massive total spiritual transformation. The word Jonah chose as a curse ends up being the exact description of their salvation.
It's literary genius. And the scale of this transformation, this overturning, is where the ancient satire reaches its absolute peak of absurdity.
It really does.
The people hear these 5 vague words and they immediately believe God. They call a fast and put on sackcloth, from the greatest of them to the least.
Instant revival.
Yeah. The news reaches the king of Nineveh. He steps off his throne, strips off his royal robes, covers himself in sackcloth, and sits in ashes.
And then the king issues a formal citywide decree. And the decree is the height of hyperbole.
Okay, what does he decree?
He orders that neither man nor beast, herd nor flock shall taste anything. Everyone must fast. Everyone must wear sackcloth.
And not just the humans.
No, not just the humans.
This is the part that breaks my brain. The king literally decrees that the herds and the flocks, the cows and the sheep must also be covered in sackcloth and cry out mightily to God.
It's incredibly bizarre.
I mean, imagine walking through a massive ancient metropolis and seeing a cow wearing a burlap mourning sack mooing in repentance.
Right.
It is completely absurd. Why would the author include this detail? Does it diminish the seriousness of the story?
Not at all. The absurdity is exactly the point. Humor and hyperbole disarm the reader's defenses.
Okay.
The author is using this bizarre, exaggerated imagery to highlight the total, unhesitating, desperate responsiveness of these supposed pagan monsters.
Contrasting with Jonah.
He is deliberately contrasting it with the stubborn, slow, reluctant, hard-hearted prophet of Israel. The city is so terrified of judgment and so desperate for mercy that they are dressing their livestock in mourning clothes.
Wow.
They're leaving absolutely nothing to chance.
It shows that their repentance is exhaustive. It covers everything from the throne to the barn, and the king's hope is beautifully articulated.
Yes, it is.
He says, who knows? God may turn and relent and turn from his fierce anger so that we may not perish. He recognizes that mercy isn't a guarantee, but it is a possibility.
And that leads directly to verse 10, which presents a major interpretive issue that the document tackles head on.
Let's hear it.
The text says that when God saw what they did, how they turned from their evil ways, God relented of the disaster that he had said he would do to them, and he did not do it.
Now, a lot of modern readers look at that verse and immediately get uncomfortable.
Oh, definitely.
They say, wait, does God change his mind? I thought God was unchanging. Does this mean God is fickle or inconsistent?
The document's analysis is crucial here. It zeroes in on the Hebrew word neam, which means to be moved to pity, to have compassion, or to relent.
Neem. Okay.
The survey forcefully argues that this isn't fickleness or moral inconsistency on God's part. It is actually the definition of covenantal responsiveness.
How so? Like, what does that mean?
Throughout the broader biblical narrative, prophetic warnings of judgment are rarely absolute, deterministic decrees.
They aren't.
No, they're almost always conditional. They're an invitation. The implicit message behind a warning of judgment is, this is where your current path leads. Turn back.
I see.
God's judgment against evil is incredibly real, but his mercy is always aggressively available to the repentant.
Oh.
When Nineveh turned, when they shoved the birth, God responded according to his consistent, unchanging character of mercy.
Oh, wow.
Relenting isn't God changing his character. It is God acting in perfect alignment with his character when the human situation changes.
He responds to their turning with compassion, so Nineveh is saved.
Saves from destruction.
And you would think that a prophet who just orchestrated the greatest, most successful, massive revival in the history of the world would be absolutely thrilled.
You'd think so, right?
He just saved a city of over 120,000 people with a 5-word sermon. He should be writing a best-selling book on church growth.
But he isn't. He is devastated. And this brings us to the emotional and moral climax of the entire book in chapter 4.
Chapter 4, the angriest prophet and the parable of the worm.
It's a dark chapter.
The text says that God's mercy to Nineveh displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was angry. The Hebrew literally implies it was an evil to him.
Yeah.
He actually prays to God, and this prayer is a direct contrast to his prayer in the fish. Here, he complains bitterly about God's mercy.
This is where we peer into the darkest depths of Jonah's heart. He prays, and he explicitly quotes from the book of Exodus, chapter 34, verse 6.
Okay, Exodus 34.6.
Now, we need to understand the weight of this reference. For an ancient Israelite, Exodus 34.6 is the golden text.
Like the core verse.
It is the moment God reveals his foundational character to Moses after the incident with the golden calf.
Oh, right.
The Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. It is the core creed of their faith.
It's the most beautiful description of God in the Torah. But Jonah takes this beautiful creed and he weaponizes it.
Exactly. He quotes the creedal character of God Raphan, Wianun, compassionate and gracious, as an accusation.
An accusation.
She screams at God, "This is why I made haste to flee to Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and relenting from disaster."
Wow.
He is literally saying, I knew you would forgive these absolute monsters, and I hate you for it.
It is stunning. Think about the psychological mechanism happening here. He was desperate for that exact same grace when he was drowning in the ocean.
He couldn't get enough of it then.
Right. He loved God's mercy when it applied to him, but he actively, violently resents that same grace being applied to his enemies. The hypocrisy is just blinding.
The psychology of Jonah here, as the survey breaks it down, is deeply uncomfortable to witness.
Sir.
He essentially demands that God resign as the judge of the universe because God doesn't share Jonah's prejudices.
Wow.
And then he walks out of the city, sits down on the east side, builds a little booth, and waits to see what will happen to the city.
He is sitting there watching, still harboring this tiny hope that maybe the 40 days will run out and God will change his mind back and nuke the place anyway.
He wants a front row seat to their destruction.
And how does God respond to this incredible temper tantrum? Not with a lightning bolt, not with a rebuke of fire.
No, God is much more subtle.
God responds with a deeply pedagogical object lesson using nature.
He uses a plant and a worm.
Yes. God appoints, there is that word manna again, a plant to grow up over Jonah to give him shade from the beating sun and to save him from his discomfort.
Right?
And the text says Jonah is exceedingly glad about the plant. He absolutely loves it. His physical comfort has been restored.
But the lesson isn't over.
No. The next morning at dawn, God appoints a worm. And the worm attacks the plant so that it withers and dies.
Poor plant.
And then as the sun rises, God appoints a scorching east wind. The sun beats down on Jonah's head, the shade is gone, and Jonah is absolutely miserable again.
And what does he do?
He actually asks to die, saying, "It is better for me to die than to live."
The sheer absurdity of it all. God leans in and asks him, "Do you do well to be angry for the plant?"
Yeah.
And Jonah snaps back, "Yes, I do well to be angry enough to die."
Look at the contrast the author is building here. Jonah cares more about a plant that he didn't plant, that he didn't labor over, a weed that came into being in a night and perished in a night.
Right.
He cares more about that plant than he cares about a massive city full of human beings.
This is why the source document calls Chapter 4 a powerful diagnostic tool for counseling and self-reflection today.
A diagnostic tool, I like that.
It is a brilliant psychological mirror held up to the reader. It forces you to look at entitlement, bitterness, compassion fatigue, and the horrific human tendency to weaponize our own theology against the concept of mercy.
Wow.
God's final response to Jonah encapsulates the thematic core of the entire book. He says, "You pity the plant." And should not I pity Nineveh, that great city in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not know their right hand from their left, and also much cattle.
And also much cattle. He brings up the livestock again.
He does. It's such a brilliant touch of humor at the end of a very heavy theological smackdown.
It really is.
God essentially says, even if you don't care about the people, Jonah, shouldn't I at least save the cows?
That's amazing. But let's pause here, because this is where the genius of the satire springs the trap on the ancient reader, and honestly on us today.
Definitely.
The author is essentially asking the reader, look at how angry you are that the bad guys got forgiven. Does your theology only apply when it benefits your own tribe?
It's a devastating psychological mirror. Jonah's ultimate failure is that he allows his ethnic, national, and political identity to completely override his prophetic calling to share God's compassion.
Right.
He restricts his moral concern strictly to his own group.
Which brings us to the final analytical section of the document, the canonical echoes and the modern mirror.
Yes, the big picture.
How does this hyper-specific, highly stylized, ancient story connect to the rest of the broader biblical narrative, and how does it translate to relevance today?
Well, the document is very clear on its canonical placement. Jonah sits within the collection known as the Minor Prophets, or the 12.
Okay.
Its function in that specific collection is vital. It acts as a permanent, glaring corrective to ethnic reductionism.
What does that mean practically?
The Israelites were chosen by God, yes, but the book of Jonah exists to prove that they were elected for service to the world, not for exclusivity from the world.
Right, God's election wasn't a VIP pass to a private spiritual club. It was a commissioning to be a conduit.
Precisely. If we trace this redemptive historical line, it is a consistent theme.
Where else do we see it?
It starts all the way back in Genesis 12, where God explicitly tells Abraham that through his family, all the families of the earth will be blessed.
Oh, yeah.
It moves through the prophets, like Isaiah 49, where Israel is called to be a light to the Gentiles. The book of Jonah dramatizes the horrific results when God's people refuse that exact vocation.
And that trajectory doesn't stop in the Old Testament.
No, it points straight into the New Testament. The survey draws a direct line from Jonah to the book of Acts, specifically chapters 10 and 11.
What happens there?
There, the Apostle Peter has to learn the exact same painful lesson about Gentile inclusion when God sends him to the house of a Roman centurion named Cornelius.
Oh, wow. Peter and Jonah, parallel stories.
Exactly. Peter, functioning much like Jonah, initially resists going to the house of an enemy occupier, and God has to systematically break down his deeply ingrained prejudice.
But the ultimate, most profound connection the research makes is Christological, because Jesus himself brings up the story of Jonah.
He does. In the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, when the religious leaders ask Jesus for a sign to prove his authority, Jesus says the only sign they will receive is the sign of Jonah.
He connects his own impending death, burial, and resurrection, 3 days in the earth, with Jonah's 3 days in the belly of the fish.
Right, the timeline aspect.
But the document points out an even deeper, more thematic contrast. It isn't just about the 3 days. Jesus is presented by the gospel writers as the greater Jonah.
Yes. Think about the mechanisms of contrast here. Jonah is called to minister to his mortal enemies, and he actively flees the other way.
Right.
Jesus, according to Christian theology, is sent from heaven to a world of enemies, a world in rebellion against God, and he willingly descends into it.
The descent is intentional, not an escape.
Exactly. Furthermore, Jonah violently resents the mercy shown to Nineveh.
Yeah.
Jesus, while hanging on the cross, actively secures mercy for his executioners, praying, "Father, forgive them."
That is a stark difference.
Jonah tells God he would rather die than see his enemies saved. Jesus actually dies so that his enemies can be saved. The underlying logic of the gospel narrative completely inverses the catastrophic moral failure of Jonah. Jesus succeeds exactly where Jonah fails.
That is an incredibly powerful literary and theological connection, and it leads perfectly into how the source document brings this ancient text into our modern world.
The modern mirror?
Yeah. The research explicitly notes that the Book of Jonah directly addresses modern tribalism, political hatred, and selective compassion.
It is fiercely relevant today.
And just to be completely clear with you listening, the text isn't picking a side in our modern debates.
No, not at all.
It doesn't care if you're on the political left, the political right, or somewhere entirely outside of that spectrum. It is an equal opportunity offender.
No.
The observation the document is making is that if you are restricting your moral concern only to your own ideological group, If you are using your theology, your worldview, or your politics as a righteous shield to justify your prejudice and avoid showing basic mercy or compassion to those you deem outsiders or enemies, this ancient text universally condemns that mindset.
It is a devastating critique of anyone who attempts to domesticate or gatekeep God's grace.
Gatekeep grace, yes.
The survey warns that while the pursuit of justice is vital, justice detached from mercy simply mutates into self-righteousness and cruelty.
Wow.
When we look at leadership today, or when we examine our own hearts, Jonah serves as a permanent warning against the normalization of contempt. It forbids us from guarding grace as if it were our own personal property, to dispense only to those we deem worthy.
So let's look back at the incredible journey we've taken today, pulling this story out of the Sunday school felt boards and putting it back into its massive, muddy, complex reality.
It's been quite a ride.
We started in the terrifying historical shadow of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, a real, documented geopolitical threat with massive 12-kilometer walls and a reputation for unparalleled cruelty.
We watched a highly credentialed prophet physically and spiritually spiral downward, fleeing his calling,
Right.
preferring to drown in the chaos of the sea rather than see his enemies forgiven, only to be preserved by a great function and act of severe mercy.
We witnessed the absolute absurdity of a half-hearted, five-word sermon sparking a citywide, hyper-exaggerated revival, complete with livestock dressed in sackcloth.
And we finally arrived at the bitter, deeply uncomfortable climax of a prophet furious at the boundless mercy of his own God.
Yeah.
A man who cared more for the shade of a withered plant than for 120,000 human souls.
It is a narrative that forcefully proves God's sovereignty extends over the chaos of the storms, over the beasts of the sea, over the growth of plants, the destruction of worms, and the rise and fall of massive empires.
He's in control of it all.
But more importantly, it proves that His mercy constantly outruns the borders of our prejudices.
The book turns the prophetic lens away from the obvious flaws of the supposed bad guys and focuses it entirely, uncomfortably, on the hidden, festering flaws of the supposed good guy.
And that brings us to the end. But the survey points out something truly profound about how this specific book ends, because it doesn't wrap up with a neat little bow.
No, it ends incredibly abruptly.
It ends on a massive cliffhanger. God asks Jonah that final piercing question, "Should not I pity Nineveh, that great city?" And that's it.
Yeah, that's the end.
There is no chapter 5. We never hear Jonah's answer. We don't know if he repented or if he stayed mad and died on that hill.
The question just hangs there in the air, completely unresolved in the text.
Exactly. And the reason we never get Jonah's answer is because the author didn't forget to write an ending. The lack of an answer is a deliberate literary device.
Right.
It means the question isn't actually for Jonah anymore. The question is directed entirely at you, the reader.
That's the mirror.
As you go back to your life today, as you scroll through your news feeds, as you encounter your own Ninevehs, the people, the politicians, the groups, the nations you naturally want to see fail, the ones you secretly hope get exactly what's coming to them, you have to answer God's question.
It's unavoidable.
Will you remain sitting outside the city, guarding your own comfort under a dying plant, waiting for their destruction? Or will you allow your heart to be overturned, sharing the heart of a God whose compassion knows absolutely no borders?
The ending of the story isn't written on the page.
No, it's in what you do next.
A phenomenal text, a brilliant piece of satire, and a deeply necessary challenge for any era.
Thank you for joining us as we explored these murky, complex waters and rescued a masterpiece. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.